The pairings for the second annual SEC ACC Challenge are out, and the schedulers, as the kids say, missed a chance to do something hilarious.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. Reminder that you can get every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all you everydayers out there and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on the show today, we are going to talk about the ACC SEC Challenge pairings, which were released on Wednesday. We're going to look at the Players Era Festival, which was finally released officially. And of course, we have to say goodbye to another college basketball legend, none other than, or college basketball and NBA legend, I should say, none other than the logo. As I record, I'm watching the Celtics polish off game 3 over the Mavs. About 10 seconds left. Despite a big Mavs comeback, this thing's about to be 3-0, ladies and gentlemen. All right. As we begin to talk about ACC SEC Challenge, for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm actually going to pull up the pairings so that you can see them. If you are listening to the show today, you can go find it. Either watch it on YouTube or look on the Discord. We've got it on there. You can find it on my Twitter feed as well. Early in the day on Wednesday, John Rothstein tweeted out the pairings per sources, so it wasn't official yet, but if Rothstein's putting it out there in the world, you can take it as official, which then the ESPN PR did on Wednesday afternoon, and we knew it was official. A reminder, last year, in the first year of the ACC SEC Challenge, we had just the 14 SEC teams. I say just. We had 14 SEC teams and 15 ACC teams. We welcome 5 new schools into the mix this year. Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, and SMU, Cal, and Stanford to the ACC. So we've now got 16 games with 2 ACC schools left out, and 10 of those games are going to happen on Tuesday, December 3rd. The other 6 will be on Wednesday, December 4th, including the 2 marquee games of this matchup. Let me just run you through them. We don't have times yet for them, so we don't know exactly when they will be, but we do know the networks last year because it's an ESPN entity. So last year it was on the ESPNs, and some were on ACC network, some on SEC network. Typically, it was, if I remember correctly, games hosted by an ACC school would have some on ACC and vice versa for the SEC. So here's Tuesday's slate for you. Arkansas at Miami, Cal at Mizzou, Florida State at Louisiana State. That's weird that I said it that way. FSU at LSU, Georgia Tech at Oklahoma, Kentucky at Clemson, Notre Dame at Georgia, Ole Miss at Louisville, South Carolina at Boston College, Syracuse at Tennessee, and Wake Forest at Texas A&M. And then the 6 Wednesday games are Alabama at North Carolina, Auburn at Duke, Pittsburgh at Mississippi State, Texas at NC State, Vandy at Virginia Tech, and Virginia at Florida. So as you hear those, you can catch some of the storylines right out of the gate. The 2 ACC teams left out were 2 of the newcomers. It wasn't Cal, but Stanford and SMU are not in this year's version of it. Last year when we had 14 games, it was tied at 7 in the end. I believe, if I remember correctly, ACC had a 7-4 lead. SEC rattled off 3 straight, including Arkansas beating Duke at home for the tie. As I look at this, I mentioned in the cold open, the schedulers missed a massive opportunity to do something very, 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 very funny here. I have no idea why Arkansas didn't get sent to Louisville. Sending John Calipari to Louisville, and let's not forget, who's one of his assistants? Kenny Payne. Sending Kenny Payne back to Louisville? I mean, how did we miss this? Come on, man. It's like schedulers, you had one job to do and you missed out. I mean, I just assumed it was like a gimme that was going to be one of our games, but we don't get it. Several people have asked me about maybe Kentucky and Louisville squaring off. Just as a reminder, though, they don't need to do it in this event because they typically play every late December between Christmas and New Year's, just as part of their non-con schedule anyway. And that's, of course, assuming that Mark Pope and Pat Kelsey are going to keep that going on and on and on every year. But Arkansas at Louisville not being a thing is clearly the biggest miss on this whole thing. I went through this and picked out what to me are my 5 favorite games for this thing. The standouts, the top 2 to me are Auburn at Duke and Alabama at North Carolina. Obviously, Duke brings in the number 1 recruiting class in the nation, headlined by Cooper Flagg, but Auburn's bringing in, so I know they lost several pieces, but they get Janai Broome back, who was an All-American last year, should be preseason All-American as well. How will Duke's young front court hold up against him? You also get in a couple other players, Miles Kelly from Georgia Tech, JP Pegues from Furman, who hit the big shot in the NCAA tournament to knock out Virginia 2 years ago. So some really intriguing stuff there as Auburn heads to Cameron Indoor Stadium. Alabama and North Carolina, this is obviously very intriguing. These two schools have played, it'll be now 3 years in a row. Back in the 22-23 season, they played in PK 85. That was a 4 overtime game with the Brandon Miller team. They ended up winning that in 4 overtimes. And then obviously these two teams played in the Sweet 16 this year. That North Carolina had a lead late. Alabama came back and won that game, and obviously eventually went on to the Sweet 16 where they were beaten by the eventual national champion UConn Huskies. But also Carolina lost a big recruiting battle to Alabama recently. Jaren Stevenson, who decided to pull out of the NBA draft and come back. His mom played at North Carolina, and it was expected that he would go there. He reclassed and committed to Bama last year. And so, like, all sorts of storylines. Obviously, speaking of Janai Broome as an All-American, Mark Sears is back and RJ Davis is back. 2 All-Americans. We get that matchup. Should be electric, these 2 games within all those close miles of each other there. A couple other games I'm watching closely. Kentucky at Clemson. I know that Clemson loses PJ Hall. If he was still there, this game would have even more luster, but they've got multiple other players back. Clemson does. And then obviously we'll get to see Kentucky in multiple high-level opportunities in non-con play, but this will be another one of them in a true road environment at Clemson against Brad Brownell's team. So that should be a really interesting game there. Another one that stands out to me is Syracuse at Tennessee. Obviously, Dalton Knecht is gone, but both of these squads should be interesting. And Wake Forest at Texas A&M is the 5th game that I'll mention that I'm really intrigued by. Hunter Salas comes back to Wake Forest. Should be a really, really good backcourt matchup between these two teams in College Station. So, very excited for the second ACC SEC Challenge. What games are you looking forward to? What storylines stick out to you? Now, we move from one challenge to one brand new MTE. The NIL-backed Players Era Festival, MTE, has long been rumored, and finally, it was officially announced on Wednesday, and they're aiming to upset the whole MTE apple cart. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time. As I said, the NBA Finals are rolling on. We just saw the Celtics take a 3-0 lead, but maybe you want to get to game 4 before this thing is over. That's tomorrow, Friday night. Well, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Now, I just checked out Game 4 tickets before the game ended, so they might go down now that this thing is 3-0, so 3 games to none. So you might even get a better deal than what I'm about to tell you. But the lowest price I found was $668, section 324, row P. Best deal per Game Time, section 101, row N. Lower baseline, $1,465, $1,465. That's not too bad. Several lower level flash deals as well. Go check it out. you never know. With it being 3-0, you might find a really, really good deal. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. The Players Era Festival has finally been officially announced. This will be the inaugural year of it. There have been rumors for a while and the teams involved and all sorts of stuff, but now it's official and we have more details, not full details, but a vast majority of them. We got a few sketchy details early Wednesday, and then Wednesday afternoon, more full details came out. The majority of the reporting I'm going to utilize comes from CBS Sports' Matt Norlander, so credit to him for this great work. The field, let me give you a reminder of the 8 teams: Alabama, Creighton, Houston, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, and Texas A&M. Per Norlander's reporting, 7 of those 8 teams are signed on already for the next 3 seasons. The lone outlier there is Oregon, who was already committed to the Maui Invitational for 2025. Although, hear me say this, being committed to something this year didn't stop Creighton, who was in battle for Atlantis this year, is buying their way out so that they can play in this. So let's not get too far ahead on Oregon going to Maui. They might end up doing this as well. The tentative schedule for this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday of Thanksgiving week, with Thanksgiving Day being an off day for these teams. Perhaps the most critical thing I was curious about was the actual format of what they're going to do. And it's going to change every year because the expectation is that there are more teams coming in, but we'll talk looking forward here coming up in just a minute. But the format of this thing, again, this is per Matt Norlander's reporting, is that we will have 2 4-team tournaments and there's a 3-game guarantee. From the article, let me just read this quote to you because it's interesting to me how this is going to go. After 2 games in 4-team bracket play, there will be standalone neutral site games, including 1 championship game between the teams that went 2-0 in their respective brackets. So it's round robin, but you're only playing 2 of the 3 teams in your bracket. That lineup makes it just like, for sure, fine, do whatever, but it's just not really logical. Like, if you're only going to play 2 of the 3 teams in your bracket, then let's make 3-team pools and have a different number of teams, and that get 12 teams so you can do 4 3-team brackets, right? And then that way you can do round. So it's just kind of weird to me, but whatever, fine, do your thing. Bracket 1, the expectation is that this is going to be Alabama, Houston, Notre Dame, and Rutgers, and bracket 2 will be Creighton, Oregon, San Diego State, and Texas A&M. Obviously, because in multi-team events, teams in the same conference cannot play one another, which is going to cause, as we've talked about, havoc and issues with some other events going forward. For example, CBS Sports Classic has both UCLA and Ohio State. They're not playing each other this year, so it's not an issue. But in future years, or a future year where they would play each other, they can't because they're both in the Big Ten. So that's something they're going to have to get figured out, and we'll keep our eyes on that, obviously. But anyway, so in this one, you have to keep Alabama and Texas A&M separate, and you have to keep Oregon and Rutgers separate because they're both Big Ten schools, and they are. And so we have those 2 brackets. In terms of how to watch this thing, quote, a broadcast partner is expected to be finalized in the coming month. So, by this is June 12th, June 13th, as you're listening to this. So, mid to late July, we expect to get that announcement. But quote, with the likely destination to be on a streaming service. So that's interesting and obviously makes sense in the world we're living in now. So that's intriguing. Initial matchups. We're getting the first matchups for each bracket. We will have Houston versus Alabama, Rutgers versus Notre Dame, and in the other pool, Creighton versus Oregon, and Texas A&M versus San Diego State. Storylines with this thing, with the format of it, and then how they're choosing to play it out, it's weird to me. Houston and Alabama are the 2 best teams, or at least on paper, project to be the 2 best teams in this entire event, top 8. in these 8 teams. I expect both of those teams, when the AP preseason poll comes out, to be top 5. I think both might get, in fact, first place votes. We'll see who actually ends up being number 1. I expect it to be either Kansas or Alabama. We'll see how much people dock Kansas for the Elmarco Jackson injury. But what's a miss to me is having Houston and Alabama in the same bracket, and then B, having them play right out of the gate. Ideally, is you want them in separate brackets, and you want them to be the teams that come out of those brackets and play in the championship game. However, I do see that having them play in the same bracket ensures that they're going to play, which you want to make sure you get, that marquee matchup. So I see that coming right out of the gate. But again, it's just a weird format, and that to me is part of like a kind of meh about this first year of it, but sure, fine, whatever. Another storyline to watch for me, and obviously, I'm so glad that we get that game. Let's just say that about it. While it's weird schedule, weird format, I'm glad that we get Houston and Alabama playing. Second storyline for me is Dana Altman versus Creighton. Reminder that Dana Altman, Oregon's head coach, was at Creighton for 16 years, 1994 through 2010, and then obviously went up to Eugene. And remember that these two teams played last year in the second round of the NCAA tournament, a phenomenal double overtime game that Creighton eventually prevailed in. Really, really, really good stuff there. So again, the other biggest storyline for me is just that the format really is odd. It doesn't work with this number of teams, but you got to do something to where you're playing every team in your group, right? And I get it, because an MTE is 3 games. You don't have 4, and that would be 4 games. Like if you played every team in your group, that would be 3 games plus that 4th game. But here's my question: why, would the NCAA allow it to be, hey, the 3-game round robin part counts as your MTE, and then that championship game is just a standalone non-con game for each of these teams? Whoever finishes first, second, third, and fourth in each bracket just squares off against each other in a 4th game, and that could just be a non-con game, neutral site, not associated with this. Maybe that's a way to get around it by having this number of teams. But it's just, again, I think that would be ultimately better. Now, the other thing with this is the goal of the Players Era Festival is to make this the premier November multi-team event. They have said that. So my question is, what does that mean going forward for the other big-time MTEs that we currently have? And what else can we expect from the Players Era Festival going forward? And of course, we have to say goodbye to a legend of basketball. And we'll do all of that coming up in just a second. We're talking about the Players Era Festival, this brand new NIL-backed MTE event coming up. MTE event, that's like saying MLB baseball or ATM machine. Multi-team event. Anyway, this MTE coming up this November. Another quote from the Matt Norlander article that I want to unpack is this. Quote, organizers have committed to a 5-year plan in Las Vegas in an attempt to make the Players Era Festival the premier November college basketball multi-team event. So right now, Maui is the main multi-team event. I would say Battle for Atlantis right now is number 2 on that list. And then there's others that are, close in on that. But I would say those are the biggest 2. So the question is, what do you do with this threat if you're Maui and if you're Battle for Atlantis? Do you say, hey, look, that's great that they want to be the premier event, but we Battle for Atlantis don't think what they're doing is financially sustainable. We don't think they'll be able to raise the money or the capital or whatever they do to be able to keep this thing running and make it what they hope to be. And so maybe you just bet on, we've got the thing, they're not going to be able to pull this off. That's one option. The other option is Maui and Atlanta says, all right, Atlantis has already lost Creighton to this thing, and we see other teams and schools eventually starting to do this, and we think this is going to work. We now have to figure out ways to keep our events being what they are. We have to find ways to utilize NIL for us. So maybe, for example, the Maui Invitational is sponsored typically by Maui Gym sunglasses, right? Like maybe that's part of it. And they pitch in money and get other sponsors on board and just make it a whole big thing. I don't know what they're going to do, but there has to be some sort of response from these other events to continue to be at the tip top of these November MTEs, or events like this are going to take it away from them. A big part of that is, look, this event isn't planning to just stay at 8 teams. The expectation is that the Players Era Festival is going to more than double for the 2025 event and beyond. The goal for next year, the understanding, is at least 18 teams. Those on board already for next year include Gonzaga, Michigan, St. John, Syracuse, St. Joe's, and others like Duke, Kansas, and Virginia have been in talks but haven't formally committed or signed on yet. But if they can get those, the teams we already have, plus a Gonzaga, a Duke, a Kansas, a Virginia, I mean, good grief, this would be taken over. And keep in mind, if they sign on to this for multiple years, that means they can't be playing in those other ones. And so that means, Maui's not going to have them, or Atlantis, or whomever it is. So this is a really interesting thing to keep an eye on. Now, one of the things for me is I love the idea of them going to 18 teams, because then you could create 6 pods of 3 teams each. And then you get the winners from that and move on, or, connect, pair up. If you've got 6 pods of 3 teams, just connect all 3 of them, and is like the winner of this one and the winner of this one play, or whatever it is. Or if they find a way in conjunction with the NCAA to make it bigger, one of the things they're talking about doing is, this is also from Matt Norlander's article, beginning in 2025, the expectation is to create, quote, international style group play with championship matchups. I'm talking like, think World Cup when we're talking about that, right? Like how you have your groups, you play a round robin against everyone in your group, and then you move on to elimination rounds where, quarterfinals and so on until you go forward. And I don't know if they'll be able to do a whole bracket after that, or just one extra game. I don't know what that looks like. Will they still only be able to do 3 games as part of an MTE? We don't know. But man, there's a lot of possibility with this thing. And if they're able to do what they hope to do, I mean, they're hoping to expand to content, non-fictional content, stuff in the off season. And so I just, who knows what this is going to become? But part of that is because there hasn't been NIL, and they're trying to ride that wave. So keep your eyes on it, and we'll find out. Now, I want to make sure we spend an appropriate amount of time here at the end of the show paying our respects to a basketball legend, the logo, Jerry West, who died Wednesday at the age of 86. And man, this is tough, coming just a couple weeks after Bill Walton passed away. And so we lose a couple basketball icons within very short succession of one another. Look, Jerry West's accolades are unreal. And so I just want to kind of go through and share some of those with you. Not just name them off, but like, look at some of the insane things this man has done. Gold medalist for the 1960 Olympic team, alongside like Oscar Robertson and other greats in college basketball. Played for West Virginia, a 2006 Hall of Fame inductee. He was the Final Four most outstanding player in 1959, despite the Mountaineers not winning the national championship. They were the runner-up, and yet Jerry West won Final Four MOP. Also, oh, by the way, he did the same thing in the NBA. He's the only player in NBA history to this day to be named Finals MVP despite being on the losing team. That was in 1969. So he did that at college level and at the NBA level. Man, Jerry West, baller. 2-time All-American at West Virginia, 24.8 points per game he averaged for the Mountaineers. Crazy stuff. NBA, man, a whole litany of accolades for Jerry West here. Interestingly, we call him the logo. The NBA has never confirmed that they used him for that, but they've also never denied it. And I remember seeing a quote from Adam Silver, I think it was a couple years ago, basically, hey, we've never confirmed that it is Jerry West, and then some kind of not snide remark, like just kind of, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for, but he said, but boy, it sure does look like him, doesn't it? Just a little wink and a nod to, yeah, it's absolutely him. NBA, Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer in 1980. He won just one championship as a player, 1972, although he went to the finals 9 times as a player. But he did win 8 NBA finals as an executive, including 6 with the Lakers, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, the Showtime Lakers, and kind of engineered the Kobe Shaq stuff. I mean, just great stuff there. He was this is where some of the wild ones. He played 14 NBA seasons, and he was an all-star 14 times. Yes, was an all-star every year of his NBA career, but he was also a great two-way player. He was an all-NBA first or second teamer 12 times, but was also part of the first 5 all-defensive teams for the NBA. And the only reason it was that few is because they didn't start those till my man was 32 years old already. Unreal stuff. Scored a career 25,192 points in NBA, 27 points per game. He was the 3rd ever player to reach that milestone. And to this day, he is the 25th leading scorer in NBA history, despite all these guys that have come along and done it after him. He still holds the record for the most points per game in a playoff series in the NBA, 46.3. And oh, by the way, also to this day, has scored the most points in NBA Finals history, more than anyone. I mean, just think of all the names and all the great scores. Jerry West scored more points than all of them. I mean, it's so cool. 6,238 career assists, 6.7 per game, 5,366 rebounds, 5.8 rebounds per game. So this man averaged over 25 points, over 6 assists, and over 5 rebounds a game in the NBA. Just ridiculous stuff. He will be inducted to a Hall of Fame for the 3rd time this year as a contributor to the sport, both as an executive and a consultant. Jerry West, man, just massive contributor to the game. And this to me is just a great way to sum up just the company he keeps as an all-timer. He is one of only 3 players ever to be the NBA Finals MVP, to be the NCAA Tournament Most Outstanding Player, and also to win an Olympic gold medal. The other 2 players on that list with him, some dude named Hakeem Olajuwon and some other guy named Magic Johnson. That's it. Not Michael Jordan, not LeBron James, because he never went to college. So, some of that just couldn't have happened, but still, wild stuff from Jerry West. Unbelievable part of our game, and somebody that if you've just never read much about him or experienced it, man, just go check it out. Honor his life in that way, as he was with his family as he passed away at the age of 86. That's it for today's episode of Locked On College Basketball. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're not already subscribed to the show, please do so on audio and video. It would mean a lot to us and really help continue to grow the show, as well as leaving 5-star reviews wherever you can. It helps us so much. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you join that. It's free to join, and the link is in the show notes. Well, as always, apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. Or today, let's go Mountaineers in honor of the logo. But until tomorrow, Andy Patton will be right back with you. Peace.